Music, an artist and music tech enthusiasts insight, and how to get started. That nice poster there is me as an avatar. I know, she looks just like me. So I'm going to talk a bit of my own experience of how I built a performance like that, and try and give you an insight on the tech you need, a kind of couple of resources, and also just how you can get started. I'm very passionate about this. I'm very excited. I might ramble because I am very excited, and if I do, I apologize. Very quickly, just why you should listen to me, or why I might have some credentials to make me credible. I'm an Edinburgh-based artist, composer, sound designer, programmer, DJ, anything that's to do with music I like to do and touch on. I work full-time as an audio programmer at Rebellion. It's a game company down in Oxford, but I work from Edinburgh. I did a 4-year undergrad in music tech, where I focused on music in video games, which was fun. And last year I finished a research project and I did my master's in sound design, and I focused on interactive audiovisual pop music performance, because that's where I come from. Like, I do pop music and I'm an artist, so that's where I always come from, and I try to see things from that perspective. So what is adaptive and interactive music? Just real quick, so it all started with video games, because even in the 70s, 80s, you had games and the player's in charge of what that timeline is, right? It's a non-linear medium. It can take ages to go from A to B, and that person's in charge, not the composer. So nothing ever happens the same way twice. So we're trying to bring that into music. What is adaptive music? Like, all these terms are kind of interchangeable. So adaptive music is music that reacts to the game environment. Interactive music is music that reacts to the player. Generative music is this whole other thing I'm not going to get into because it's really complicated, but it's algorithms that create musical structures, which is also quite fun. And dynamic music is just kind of an umbrella term. But generally, like adaptive, interactive, dynamic, you can interchange those terms, especially when we talk about performance. And in game music theory, you talk about horizontal resequencing, which is transitioning between different sections in pieces, and you're trying to build pieces in a way that you can just transition between different parts, not even if you imagined them to be connected. And vertical reorchestration, which just means, you know, changing up the mix. You're going to fade down one element, bring up another one, and stuff like that. The approach, so the studio approach, and I want to mention first of all that this is not to do with recording, because the whole point of this is it can't be recorded. It always changes. You have a start point, you have an end point, but it could take 20 minutes to get from A to B. It took 5 minutes, and it's more about creating that material, that base material. So I think it gets really interesting when you think about songwriting, because I also write songs like, you know, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. So when you've got these kinds of pieces where you're performing live and there's elements that influence the structure of it, you want to think in ways where you're like, okay, can I go from this verse to this verse? Can I bring in this whole other thing? So instead of thinking of it as this very straight linear thing, think of it as like these elements that you're trying to connect and interlink, and how that might happen, and how you can have other people, other visuals or games influence my music in real time. And I think it just kind of changes how you perform it and how you approach songwriting. So it's about creating musical material that you can then stretch out into way longer than you might think it would be. So yeah, think about how you can interlink it and how you can transform the material as well, so that your listeners, like, especially like I write songs that are 4 chords, right? We all do it. It's great fun, and you find so many ways that you can keep that interesting for 4 minutes, 5 minutes, however long. So you need to think of that even maybe longer, or in ways where you just try and add something new or take something away and transform it through, again, resequencing it or adding some effects, just to keep the listener hooked as well, because you don't want to get stuck in a loop of the same thing over and over again. So that's something to consider as well. Yeah, so just how detailed do you want to be with this as well? Is it sections, like, you know, again, chorus, verse? Is it chords, or even like very granular on a note level? There's ways that you can do that. It gets a bit more complicated when you get into algorithms, but you could technically be like, okay, I'm in this key now, so I want to get to this key. So then there's a program that goes, cool, what chords do we have in common? What notes do we need to get there? And stuff like that. So you can get very granular, but why would you sometimes, you know? Is it really necessary? You have to think about that yourself. Right, the tech, the software, very important. I think nothing beats Ableton Live as a live performance DAW, and that's especially because, so you have the arrangement view, which you have in other DAWs like Logic, Pro Tools, where you have your timeline, you have your different channels, you arrange your song, cool, you're in the studio recording it, you've got your elements, it comes together, you bounce it out, done. I think with Ableton Live and the session view, you can see at the top there, you have all these different loops that you can just bring in whenever you want to. You can go into this section, you can go into this section. You just have this idea pop up in your head, okay, let's enable this track, we're gonna bring in this loop and then fade it in slowly and stuff like that. And it's almost like a bit DJing as well, but you can do that in a pop performance. And then you can also find a way to combine the arrangement view where you've got a backing track running, while at the same time, you bring in loops just as you go and as you want to do it. Then another very important piece of software where we get to the actual coding stuff, which I think a lot of artists are often a bit scared by, is Maximus P and Max for Life. So it's visual programming. And I think so in the middle you see this example. You can kind of imagine it as like, for example, you're a guitarist. Yeah, you've got your guitar pedals and you've got all these patch cables and you put it together and you know this signal goes into here and then it makes this thing. So it's the same kind of thing. You get these different boxes that the program provides you with. You know what these boxes do, and then you can connect those boxes to do this thing or this thing. And you can send signals all through different channels in Ableton, and it's good fun. And I'm a big nerd, so I love this kind of stuff. You can also work with MIDI, send MIDI on different things, trigger MIDI. MIDI is your best friend when it comes to working with Ableton and like interactive stuff as well. If you don't really want to invest, because it does cost money, especially if you get Max for Life, which is integrated into Ableton, which itself also costs money. There's also Pure Data, which is a bit more stripped down, and it gets a bit more complex because you can't directly integrate it to a DAW like Ableton. But it's for free, and if you really want to dig into it, it's also very good fun. Talking about audience interaction, so this is something I've trialed a little bit in that mostly in academia, but also more in the mainstream, some people have tried out recently. So it's about creating a heightened feeling of immersion. So you get the audience to have a say in the music. And there's different ways you can kind of approach it. There's been different studies. A lot of the time, there'll be like a prompt that'll be like, okay, you go to this website, you get this app, or you get to vote on which section are we going into next. Metallica even did it where they were like, which song should we play next? And they just put it on a big screen and people had an influence on the set list. And suddenly you have the audience feeling really involved in your performance, which is ultimately something that I personally, at least, really want to achieve. And you can do that through smartphones, of course. You can't always assume everyone has a smartphone. I did it through game controllers. I'm going to show an example of that as well, because I worked with video game engines. You could build a dedicated website. It sounds complicated, but if you know somebody who's like into HTML and stuff like that, it's actually quite easy as well. You can use the Twitter API, or you used to be able to. Thank you, Elon Musk, for making that something that's not free anymore. And then, of course, you need to consider how much control do I want to give away? Because I'm very much a control freak, and I like to know what's happening. But then you can do something that you're comfortable with. You can even create a bit of an illusion that the audience is in charge here, while actually you know that still at the end of the day, you're the one who gives them a certain percentage of what you want to give them. But I think it's a great way to connect with the audience in a way that they usually probably wouldn't do a live gig. Then the big question, why? Why do you want to put yourself through this? This seems sometimes a bit complicated, like it's a lot of effort, yes, can be. But yeah, I think it's about finding your own reason why you might want to dig into this. Something that I found through my research, so I chatted to a couple of different artists in the Scottish scene from various genres, from folk to electronics, and it was always about breaking that barrier between performer and spectator, and not trying to have that just be a one way of communication, but opening up that communication to be two-way and really just trying to create a new performance space where people feel more involved and they're connecting with the artist that they came to see. It's also about communicating meaning and emotion in new ways, kind of having a red thread that guides you through your performance. Also just to have fun. I think it's great fun. To connect with your audience and your fan base, to reinvent the whole performance setting. Maybe you go to a space and you're like, actually, what if I wouldn't stand on a stage but in the middle of the room and stuff like that, and just trying out new things and seeing how people react to it. Also to reach new audiences. There's still a lot of people who don't like to go into crowded, sweaty spaces, which is fair enough. And with stuff like this, you could easily put that online and still have that interactive part, so people actively feel like they're participating in your music and like they're connecting with you without needing to be in the same physical space. And yet to challenge yourself, I think I just like a good challenge. I wanted to try something, and thank fuck it worked, because otherwise I would have failed my degree. But yeah, it's just something to try out and to see if you like it as well. And I think what I found is that a lot of the time technology seems like something that disconnects us. But in this case, I actually felt like the performances I gave with this felt almost more genuine. And people came up to me afterwards and wanted to chat to me and wanted to talk about their experience with it as well. And I think a lot of people are scared of doing stuff wrong when they do this kind of stuff, because it's a lot of things happening. So you might lose track of what's going on, and you might do something you weren't intending to. And what you find is that the audience actually appreciates that, and they're actually kind of expecting it. And then it's about going through that together and kind of having a laugh about it, maybe. And when I did the interviews with other artists, I spoke to Laura, who's an incredible artist from Scotland, by the way. You should definitely check it out. And she said this thing that I thought was spot on, which was, I think everyone fears failing or pressing the wrong key or playing the wrong note or singing out of tune. The real freedom that I got was understanding that whatever I was performing, it was my voice. To feel genuine emotion and to feel authenticity coming out of an artist is almost more important than having a perfect sounding set. And I think that's exactly how, like, if I could have said that, I would have said that, but I didn't. But I think it perfectly sums up what I was trying to do with this as well. If you want to take a quick picture, resources recap. Ableton Live Maximum is pure data. If you go into games as well, I use Unity. It gets a bit more codey, but still fun. Google, unsarcastically, yes, use Google. YouTube, unsarcastically. People who are kind of getting into these fields and, you know, doing these new things, they are sometimes in academia, but they're mostly on the internet. And they put tutorials on the internet, and it's great, because you can learn a lot. Online forums as well, especially the one for MaxMSB. Great stuff. People, for some reason I thought 3 pillars was a good idea here. People who are all holding hands. Discord, Twitter, all of us nerds are on Discord and Twitter. Uni students are great because they like to collaborate with artists. In Edinburgh you've got We Throw Switches, who is an organization that they're focused on this exact thing, and they put people in touch with each other. And the Scottish Games Network, if you're into the kind of games interaction, interactive stuff. So quickly, before I run out of time, I'm going to show you the stuff I did. So this was my tech setup for my performance. I had a game engine running that would interact with me, my music, the audience, and I would interact with it. So I had visuals representing that as well, which was good fun. But games is also just a great place to start because it is such an interactive medium. So I had a bunch of MIDI controllers, Ableton Push, my guitars. I also had an Oculus Quest. I'm going to get into that in a second. Obviously, this is a lot of equipment, and it can get quite expensive, so if you want to get into this, think about funding. For me, because I've been doing this kind of stuff for years, a lot of that I already had. And now, an example, because it's a lot of talking, but what actually comes out of this? Good question. So I did kind of work-in-progress performance of this as part of my master's last year. So I've got 2 examples here where you see audience interaction. There's somebody with a controller playing a game, exploring the game. As they explore the game, the music changes. There's another game where it's like Guitar Hero. They need to press the right note at the right time. And the last thing is with a VR headset where with my hands and gestural control, I'm controlling the MIDI in my Ableton set. So hopefully this works. There's a couple of effects changing the mix and stuff. And the next thing, you kind of see the faders move down and up as the player hits the notes or doesn't hit the notes. So the drums are getting quieter in that instance. And then the fun part.
The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Our planet.
Hitting my microphone as I do that. Yep.
In the great enveloping cosmic dark. There is no hint that help will come from elsewhere.
Triggering samples.
From ourselves. Like it or not, for the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand.
Kind of playing with the volumes of the vocals there, and then triggering drums to come in. Yeah, it's just good fun. It looks funny, I know. So yeah, that was opening for Redolent a couple of weeks ago, and time's up. It's perfect. Here's my contact details. Oh, that's not it. There we go. Please do get in touch. I was going to show a bit of an Ableton set as well, but we're running out of time. But if you want to look at that, I'm gladly to wait outside and show you some stuff that I've set up myself with Max and Ableton. And I'm very passionate about this. I think there's so much potential, and I think it's very worth it kind of going through the tech stuff a little bit or finding somebody else who can do that for you, because I think it really changes the relationship with your audience, and I'm hoping to make this larger scale. So please do get in touch, and thank you very much.